Okay, how's it going, everybody? How are we doing? Good morning. I know, that's how I feel too. Okay, so just as a fair warning, we don't have the mic, so hopefully you guys will be able to hear me on the stream. It looks like a couple of you are, so if you could just put it in Slack if you can hear me, that'd be great. And Joey's sitting right next to his computer, so we should be good. But hopefully we'll have the demo day. You guys are using your computer anyway. How you guys doing? How's it going? How's the weekend been? Just a little check-in. Graduation is 2 weeks from Thursday. How are we feeling? Yeah? Yeah, I know. Okay, so I know a couple of you are on the stream. I just have an announcements. First thing, while I'm doing this, I want you to go, all of you to go and fill out a form. Basically, we're trying to collect data for the website. We've been trying to do this over and over, and I just keep forgetting to remind people. So it's in the announcements doc. Go fill it out. The headline is website data collection. Do this now while I'm talking, just so I can get it all from you, because we do need that. I will actually ping the link right now in the students channel, just so you guys, thank you, Linda, I appreciate that. Just so you guys can see, we need that form filled out as soon as possible, so just go fill it out. It literally takes 2 seconds. And just like a little bit of information about you, your social handles, if you have them, a bio if you want, you don't have to have that as well. A lot of it's optional. Yeah, absolutely. You could totally resend it. Basically, we need, at least just like fill it out, just or put it somewhere to remind yourself, just because we do need that like by the end of the week, if that's okay. Can you guys can fill it out for me? Okay, perfect. All right. So a little bit of information about upcoming class. So today is the 6th. Obviously, tomorrow is the 6th. Class will be at the Coworks. I'm assuming Joey will coordinate with you guys about what that's going to look like, and we can kind of go from there. August 14th, we will be doing the professional headshots to get you guys all, look good and stuff, and you can get that out before graduation. So, you don't have to dress up super fancy or whatever, but, look presentable, be ready to do that. That'll be August 14th. And then that sort of last week of class, all that information is in the big doc, which is also in the announcements doc. Basically the 19th, we're going to be here. We have this whole area reserved. The 20th, we unfortunately couldn't get this area. That's a Tuesday. So we're actually just going to be in the front of the tech garden. It's August 20th, Tuesday. We're going to be at those tables. It's actually all like renovated now, so it looks really nice, which is cool. 21st, we'll also be back here. And then the 22nd, which is graduation, hopefully be in the theater. We have a second location, more information to come. Okay. Guest speakers tomorrow. We're going to have Benjamin Lannon, who is a Gatsby contributor and also works at a software development firm out in Rome. He'll be talking about open source stuff, which will be cool. And then Glenn Allen, who I'm sure many of you know, he's always been a Hack Upstate, really great guy. He'll be talking on Thursday about his journey through freelancing, which should be pretty cool as well. Student stipends. Jesse he's traveling back from vacation today, but he will be in class tomorrow to cut you guys checks if you need reimbursements or if you need to buy things. And sort of as a little incentive for people, if everybody uses at least half of their stipend by this Wednesday, we're going to add $100 to all of your stipends. And if people will use 3/4 of their stipend by Friday, we'll add an additional $100.
I can help you spend that money.
Yes. Basically, we're giving you money, so please spend it. If you haven't I know there's a couple of you who haven't touched your stipend yet. Not necessarily who are here, but if you haven't, please use it. It's a really great resource. If you need things to spend, exactly. Talk to us. We could definitely, you can buy me a new pair of shoes. I don't know. Okay, a couple of other reminders. All these links are in the doc. Just review that last week of class rundown. I know we've been pinging it over and over and over again. There's a lot of really useful information there. I've spent about an hour trying to go through and I picked blogs from Medium. I made this really hilarious presentation that looks like crap. Yes, thank you. And there's a lot of really good stuff in there to help you with sort of as you start to finish your capstone project. I know that's like a scary thing, but it will happen, or at least prepare to present it. Also, if you haven't already, please RSVP for the meetup. Obviously, we know you're all coming, but you need to show and put yourself on there. Just so we can kind of get that official count, but also it shows people that you're actually going to come. And also just continue to take advantage of those one-to-ones. It's going to be really important that you guys are doing that, especially if we kind of come to the close here. You need it.
No.
No, I just turned the sound off. There. So that'll be really important as we kind of come to a close, getting those one-to-ones. And I'm always free. I'm on vacation next week, but you can catch me now. You can catch me the following week. Jesse will be here. All of our instructors will be here. So just kind of keep that in mind. The last class, like I've been saying, we're going to have all those community mentors. We're going to have like a ton of people. Crazy. So that's what I'm saying. All right. Does anyone have any questions? I know there's a lot of information. Yes.
When you say spend your stipend,
Yeah.
is that us physically defined? You say like, hey, we want this, and then like.
Yeah. No. Always how we've done it essentially. So if you really need something, you don't have the money, talk to us. If you buy something, you need reimbursement, same thing. And again, the incentive there, half of it by Wednesday, we'll give you $100, 3/4 by Friday, I think. And yeah, by Friday we'll add another $100. So $200, you can buy a lot. If remember, everybody has to do this. Everyone has to spend at least half of 3/4. You can't just be one of you. We can't just give you money. So encourage all of your friends.
Are you going to hang out the slacker? So
a lot of you have been spending, and you're very close to being there. So just kind of look through people on the stream, look through the records, see what you spent, see what you haven't spent. Exactly. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I really would like to buy one of the React courses.
Okay.
I kind of like the Traversy Media guy, and I know Jess loves West.
Yep.
So I'm just talking about that a little bit too. But like,
Yeah.
thoughts, opinions, like
Joe, you have an opinion?
if they have any thoughts on what it's worth.
I don't.
Front end masters subscription is worth it
Front-end
if it
master.
fits in your stipend, because it's not just React; it's all front end
How much is
technologies.
that? You know?
They usually have a sale once in a while
Okay.
for like 200 something, and it's for the whole year.
Okay. Well, if that's the case, and if you really want it, I'm sure we can find a way to like prorate it, get in touch with them. If that's something you're interested in, just slack me and we'll figure that out. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Also, I know you always are all here, people on the stream. Jesse just told me to give you the option. If people are still feeling unprepared for the demo day, we can push it to Wednesday. But I know a lot of you are probably the demo day today. But if people are still feeling unprepared, I know we've just sort of had this come up. We can push it to Wednesday. I'm imagining a lot of you will want to do it today. So today, pushing, one for pushing, Wednesday. Yeah. What did you say? You want to push or?
I want to push.
Okay.
I have nothing to show you.
Kelly, Kate, today.
I mean, I don't think it's me.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, you don't feel like you. The whole point of this is just to show us what you're doing. Don't feel like you have to prepare a mini capstone presentation each demo day. Is what I'm saying. So I think personally, I would rather do it not like as me, but if I were a student, I would just like get it over with. It's 5 minutes. You don't have to worry about it. But if you really think, obviously we'll think majority. Do people in the stream have opinions?
I'm on my way, and I'm up to do it today.
We're pretty
I
much
have the same
split
mindset
down the
to
middle
do.
in class. Yes. Anyone?
Price to stream for front-end masters and licenses.
10. Can you buy a single?
$195.
No, that's
Yeah.
you don't want to buy 10 of them
Okay. Well, if no one's
unless you want to spend everyone's money.
We're pretty much. I'm gonna.
Well, I was thinking for all of us, like.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. If no one is gonna respond, I'm just gonna say we're gonna do it today because we're all equipped. We're ready to go. I've told everyone, and I've told Joey with that we're ready to go today. So that's okay with you guys. Like I said, 2 to 3 minutes. You actually have a 3-minute max. Get it over with. It's just us. It's not a big deal. All right. So they do. If you don't want, well, no. But I'm just saying it's just us here. If you don't want to, talk to me. But yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, if anyone is concerned about having anything online, we've always said this, but just to reiterate that, if you're concerned, please talk to us. We would be happy to take something down if you're not comfortable with that. Okay, does anyone have any questions? Anyone in the stream? We good? Any questions about anything I just said about the capstone, about the demo day, about the schedule, about the form? Please fill out the form if you haven't already. Good, okay. So any brave soul would like to go first? Karen? Okay, give me 1 sec while I just get a timer set up. I actually don't think it'll stream. It's just gonna pop up. You shouldn't see it on your computer. Right? So you'll see it on here. But you actually go full screen that window doesn't even know. Okay.
I don't know if I'm sharing this screen though. I'm not sharing my screen.
Oh yeah. Well, does anybody know? Do I have to share Joey's screen in order for this to work? I don't think so, right? Okay, so I'm just gonna have you start. I'm gonna go and test it, if that's okay. All right, so
Yeah, it's
Karen, you ready?
Okay. So I had to make some notes. What have I done since the last demo day? I tried this Get Kraken. I wanted to see because you can open it up in VS Code, which is kind of cool, and so that you can get done what you need to at the same time. I don't know if this is gonna work or not. Oh yeah. This is my lovely code now. I broke it good. So I have a lot to work with that, but I created a new blog post. If you want to give it a whirl, it's this one is I'm falling down the rabbit hole for sure. But I have also connected and coded out all of my database stuff that I'm going to need, and I have them connected to the actual database that I'm going to be using. So that's kind of good. I was able to start this lovely little photo that I'm going to need within my capstone. I need to get it vectored so that I can do pin drops and everything. I know it doesn't look like much now, but eventually it will. And as a side project, I got hired to do a website for my cousin. So this is a start to that. I'm waiting on information for her to kind of get that done. And then this is like my code right here. I have a lot to put in there. So what am I currently working on? Trying to figure out how to make all of the 11 pages of HTML that I had originally coded out to get and look nice in React. Getting my endpoint set up and making that work properly so that I don't have a big mess of just this lovely little mess that I got going on here. I need to create a user account page for when somebody first opens the app. And in the next 2 weeks, hopefully getting it all wrapped up, being able to deploy it and actually have it working. So what am I struggling with? Getting all that HTML to work with my icons and everything in the front end, getting the photo finished for the vectors for my pin drop, all the bazillion of functions that I'm going to have to create to work. There's so many of those. And I'm thinking that maybe I should have chosen something a little bit easier, but that ship sailed like 20 weeks ago. So here I am. That's it. That's it. I'm good. That's where I'm at.
Good call. All right. Muted. Okay, timer's going. So welcome back to today on Kelly's capstone progress. What have I done since my last update? I have entirely restructured my project for the third time. So I'm achieving iteration here. Iteration, not sure, either way. Restructuring my project. So I decided that I couldn't do my original idea in time. So I have switched it. And it's still sensory-friendly Syracuse. But instead of being a review aggregator, it's going to be a little more like a Twitter kind of social media thing where people can make accounts and post and all that kind of stuff, because I think I can actually get that done. Since I've started over again, I've actually worked on building out the back end first, which is a different approach to projects than I've taken before, because I usually just do all the front end and then work on back end stuff. So I can show you what I have now. It's very exciting. Here's my postman. Wow, look at that. The cool thing about it though is that I have routes and they work. Oh, look at that. Made a call. Cool. So this is what my code looks like now. You can see I have my routes here. I have routes for thoughts. I am using Firebase as my back end. So I have some different functions here and things. So just a lot of stuff. Also, new GitHub. So if you are interested in following version 3 of Sensory Friendly Syracuse, you can go to this site and follow along with me. All right, got to minimize that to check my notes. How am I doing on time? Bad. Okay, what am I currently working on? So now that I have routes that work in the back end, I need to actually build a front end. So I'm using React and I'll use Redux to manage state. I have to wire the back end and the front end together because that's how web development works. I also am working on writing weekly posts for my tech blog, which is somewhere in my things here. I think it's getting covered by my Zoom thing. So I will just click here. So this is my latest entry. I can't promise they won't all be code puns in the titles, but check it out if you want to. What's coming up next? Finishing my capstone, putting together my final presentation, and then once class is over, working on some new ideas and projects and things in the works. What am I struggling with? Feeling like I'm falling behind. Getting to the finish line. I don't know how to deploy things. That part's a little scary. And also hitting the old dusty trail. Class is almost over, which means I'm going to be left with a lot more unstructured free time, which means I need to start planning things to fill that. And my takeaway here is to let yourself be impressed with how far you've come when you feel like you have too far to go. I've really struggled with feeling overwhelmed. And when I get overwhelmed, I like to take a couple of deep breaths and remind myself that this was something I couldn't do 6 months ago. So that's how far I've come and all that stuff. And that is my share. So thanks, everybody. Okay.
The desktop I'm matching on which window you want to share. But if you hit Chrome, it's only going to stream Chrome. Do you need anything else besides that? Okay. You see yourself on it.
Bigger.
You're good. Okay.
Made it bigger. Hi, let's see. My progress on the migraine app, working on getting it all into React. And it's been so challenging. So tonight I decided to at least update you on more of my process. We had this speaker, Raj Buczek, and I loved it. It was great. What he talked about was top performers and what the difference between a top performer and, as an employer, your top performer versus perhaps your people who perform maybe less or not as much as the top performers. And what he said, I don't know this is a direct quote, but they're able to see where the system is broken and they think about others. And throughout the week, I've had some struggles and I have turned to others who seem to really understand the notion of what a distributed system is about and that we're all in this together. And they are my, at least top performers to me in the class. And one is Kelly, who introduced me to Gatsby, and truly thinks about others. And I think everyone should have a Kelly on their team. And further, Kieran, another one who's just been invaluable. Midnight, she's helping others or think about others and assisting me with my Gatsby installation, my Gatsby. I had some difficulties, you might be able to see on the screen, and Karen was able to talk me through from afar. And again, the most important thing for me in my capstone in progress was these two women who think about others and are top performers in my book. So thank you. I think at the time you can just hit stop share. It's red. And then you have to like.
Okay. So my project looks a little different than last time. It actually looks worse. I kind of started with this welcome page. I had a quiz working before, and then I kind of built out a lot more aspects to my project. So what I have here is I've got my back end now working. I've got my front end, and I used React Router to connect all my pages. So nope, you're good. So now I have two areas that people can start out by taking the quiz, which the quiz has stayed the same. Eventually I'd like to randomize and add some questions to this, but my code broke yesterday when I started to do that. So I stopped and I went back. I was like, for another day. But I now have a user side and a shelter side. So on the user side, somebody can just, go ahead and start right away with an account. They can create an account, or they can go ahead and log in. And when they log in, ideally it would take them to their homepage and display their previous results, or they can go back to taking the quiz again. On the shelter side, ideally a shelter would populate my database and give me all the dogs I need for my quiz. So they can log on, they can create an account, or they could log in and eventually work to update and add dogs. So that's what I've worked on so far. And my next steps are going to be, I definitely need some sort of front end design. I think I'm gonna put the shelter stuff on hold and concentrate on user side. And then eventually, if I have time, start working on the shelter side and connecting that part with my database. But until then, this is where I'm at.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm doing the online gallery. Thank you. Since the last touch point, I started this thing called Programming with Mosh. It's a React tutorial that has the ES6 JavaScript tutorial as well, kind of wrapped up in one. I've been doing that, and since I started that, I kind of redid my whole front end based off of what I learned there. So what I did there was I now have a home page component, a gallery page component, an artist bio page component, a request form page component, and they're all connected using React Router and a navbar. I'm also working on a system to categorize all the pictures so that you can go through and say, I want to go to music pictures or whatever, what have you. What I've been struggling with is the database portion of it, the models for the database, and hooking it up through on the Amazon web server, and also the CSS and React Strat. The designing part of it has really been a struggle for me. Solutions to that have a one-on-one for the database design and the CSS part of it, CSS and React Strat, and then also I have to work with the artist as far as colors and how he wants things laid out. And I can show you what I have so far. So far, you click it, I have a nav bar, you go down, and every single one of these will take you to a different page. And then the request form is here for if you want to request a site, I'll request a painting, or he paints walls as well. He's done them for businesses and children's rooms. So that's what I have so far. My takeaway is the process is what it is. You can't rush it and you can't skip it. So you might as well enjoy it and learn all you can. Because I've tried to rush it. I've tried to find shortcuts and that, and I've only burned myself in the end. So that's my takeaway.
Awesome.
Well, this is kind of like how my whole weekend was.
Hey, Takir, are you stopped sharing? Okay. It's really funny. Do you want to restart? Can you restart Zoom?
Sure.
Okay. All right, Anna.
Where to start?
Yeah.
So this weekend I basically spent most of my time working on my database model, and I got into a problem with Postgres, and I had to download and re-download it. I posted on Slack the problem that I was having, but I was able to manage to get through that and get my server out. And so right now I have, let me see, where is it? SQL. I have these tables created. So I'm working, the next step is to work on my server and connect the tables to that, and then move on to the front end. So what I want for the front end. I was able to do this with YouTube tutorials. So that's the sign up, and it's connected to the database right now. So you'll be able to create an account. The next step is to like create a login page. This is not what I want, but it was just like a basic material UI in React sign up page. And then I saw this. I was just looking around for sample web pages, and I saw this and I thought it was really neat. So I'm trying to kind of sort of steal the design a little bit and recreate it. Yeah. So that's where I'm at right now. I've been able to get this here. So the routers, like the React routers, I was able to figure that out. And that's where I'm at right now. So a little bit.
Awesome. I'll hit mute.
So I spent the weekend working on the create account and the login assignment from last week with Max, and I had kind of hoped to essentially import that into my document, my web app, which is the cleaning service, but I couldn't get it to work. And now Karen helped me fix the last mistake, so that finally works. So that's helpful. Last week I had spent a fair amount of time just wireframing all of the different pages and building out the containers that I needed. And then what I had hoped to do after we created, I followed Max's video and created the React app with SQLize and Postgres and all the things he recommended in the video. And then I imported some of the components that I had created already based on the wireframes, but was not able to get that to work. So I'm feeling extremely frustrated and a little overwhelmed, but Max gave me a pep talk and we're gonna have a meeting after this class. So hopefully we'll get that work to work. Because if I could get everything to at least be in the same page, be in the same place, that would make me feel much better. But that's really all I have.
Anyone in the stream that we missed for the demo day? We're good. Tim is not here and he's not in the stream. Caitlin said she can't just because the sound. And Jaquay is also not here, so I think we're good.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, so now if you hit share, then you can, yeah, yep.
Cool. Can I move that up?
Yeah, they usually take a break in between the two.
Oh. We're waiting 5 minutes. All right, let's take 5, and then if anyone needs a restroom break or something,
Cool. Okay.
we'll be right back. Oh, I should probably.
Yeah, you can leave it. It's up to you.
I haven't started the video yet. Anyway.
Well, do you want it? The video is going to be you.
Oh, so
You're-
right now
you're
I'm
streaming
sharing.
right now. Yeah.
Everyone's listening to me figuring this out.
Yeah.
Hold on. Default speaker.
You might have to go to mute again. Mute yourself again. Just
we're gonna get started here. Okay, yeah, as long as I'm sharing,
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Linda will tell you it's not.
All right, Linda, are we good? Okay. So how's everyone's feelings on React so far? Just a quick thumbs up or thumbs down in the air.
I like it. I don't know how to use it.
Okay, we'll help you out.
Yes. I think this should have been earlier, but yes.
That was, yeah, we're gonna do our best. Okay. Right. It's good. Yeah, it's helpful when you understand it a little bit more. That way, even a simple application can get you thrown off if you get confused about just one thing. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you the app. We're going to build an application together over the next 2 weeks. And hopefully everyone actually participates in building this thing. It's because when you're actually typing it out, you're kind of gaining like a muscle memory and you're kind of understanding it as we go. We have 2 weeks to do it. We could easily build this in 1 week, but I'm going to stretch it out, make sure we get all the concepts in, any questions answered. Today we'll go over just any basic refresher that you need on maybe functions or classes or anything like that. And then we'll jump into the application that we'll be designing and building. And hopefully if we have enough time, we'll have all the just kind of basic functions all kind of stubbed out so that we have at least something in our code base, something local. So any burning questions on React right now? Like, is there I'm sorry? So we'll get to that in routing. And there's a couple different ways you can handle routing. Depending on the complexity of your application, you could actually have a full-fledged router, like React Router, or you can just conditionally render things based on what's happening in the application. So it really depends on it's on the app. So if you have like a something that you would expect to have like pages, you'd probably want a router, and we will definitely get to that this week. You could still use a router. There's 2 different types of routers you can use, and they're both bundled into React Router, which is the library we're going to look at. There's a browser router and a hash router, and there's key differences between the two. I'm not going to jump into routing just yet. So where I work, we use a .NET framework, which handles all of our routing. So we can't use the browser router because it'll screw up all our routes. So whenever we use routing in our applications, we use the hash router, which allows us to circumvent that. We'll get into that.
I did come across something I looked at X out of it, but it was about the brackets around components when you're importing them, exporting them.
I know what you're talking about. Yep.
One of the defaults.
Yep. Okay, we can start there. That's actually a good, because we're doing a lot of that.
Okay. So like
Icons? Styling is, there's so many ways to do styling.
I mean, I sort of talked to Max just because I started looking it up because there's specific ones that I want to use. From like all the ones that they made. So
Webpack is like a bundling library. Oh, I see what you're saying. Instead of an external library, I'll have to do some research on that for you because we have an external library that we use. So I'll have to get familiar with SVGs for you.
Because all of the icons that I'm using, I got them through
Flat icon. We can take a look at that. Maybe we can schedule out some time to take a look at that. Yeah. Oh, yes. I'll put it in there again. Okay. Yeah, so today is going to be basics refresher, in case anyone needs it. And then basic application architecture and design of what we'll be building together over the next 2 weeks. And with that in mind, this is what we'll be building over the next 2 weeks. So I'm a big fan of puns. So if anyone knows what a byte is, it's basically a curvature on a shoreline, on a body of water, whether it's a river or a lake. So it's kind of not like a bay. It's really shallow as in depth, but also shallow as in how it curves. So that's just kind of context of what byte is. And then this particular application is an inventory manager for a company called Byte, and they sell they distribute adventure gear, backpacks, canteens, hiking boots, stuff like that. And so that's where Taste Adventure one byte at a time comes from. But this is just kind of like a landing page. So when they launch their app, this is what they see. And it's very simple. There's not a lot, looks like there's not a lot going on, but all the concepts that you'll need in any size application are present here. So there's navigation, so I can navigate to different pages. We have the ability to sort things, manipulate things in state, more navigation. And so this right here is a table component. We're going to build a table with some sorting functionality in it. That'll get you familiar with building complex components that has its own internal state. There's different places you want to place state. You don't always want to throw it into like global state, and there's a lot of reasons why. And this is just another page. So shipments, we're going to implement this in class. But all of this data, we're going to pull in from a backend source. So you're going to see how pulling in data asynchronously, how can we get that into our application? It's really not that difficult. And by the time we're done, you're going to be like, wow, that's it. That's it. So it's just a matter of when to grab the data and where to put it and how to access it. And we're going to keep things on the simple side just to highlight and really go into the details of these concepts, how to do them, and how to be efficient with them. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of, actually, let me grab, oh, I'm not connected on that one. We're going to do everything locally, but I wrote this in an online editor. I'll just give you a quick overview of the architecture that we'll be going over. So here's our folder. Can everyone see this? Okay. Here's our folder structure. Any data, obviously in the data directory. Public is anything that we serve up to the quote unquote public, so just our index file. And that's going to have the reference to our application for launching our React app. So it has a div with an ID of root. Did everyone get the concept of having a div with a specific ID to be able to mount your application to? Did that? Okay. That's really all this is doing. And we also have some other links up here. And then the main body of everything is going to be in this source directory. So I'm doing styles by having a style sheet in conjunction with some components. So we'll take a look at some of that. There's a lot of ways to do styles. If I teach one way, some people will say, well, what about this way? Well, we could teach that way, but then someone will say, what about this way? There's a lot of ways to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. Whatever you're most comfortable with. At work, all we do is we have giant CSS spreadsheets that we compile down and minify into one sheet and then just serve that up. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Some people are a fan of the new CSS and JS paradigm. That's definitely one way to do it. I'm just going to show you how to do it really simply, just to illustrate how to quickly get something up and going. And also, I can share this with you. So if you want, yes? We use Bootstrap, and we kind of like overwrite a lot of it, but we use it as a base. Yep, and this is actually using Bootstrap too. It's really simple to use. A lot of time and effort went into the Bootstrap library, And I know a lot of people are like, well, it looks like every other website, but that's where you can overwrite styles and make it look like your own. It's not that difficult to do. So, but it's great for base styling, I would say, like their CSS kind of like grid system that they've got going on. That's definitely something that helps out with layout, right? Setting up things in rows and columns. That's easy to conceptualize, right? So I have this row, there's 5 elements in it. I need each one to be a specific width. It's really easy to kind of conceptualize and really type out and just get something on the screen, right? You can throw borders on everything and then just start changing the widths and margins and everything. You can see where everything kind of lines up. One of the first things I do with styling is I'll throw a border on it. I know exactly where it is on the screen. So when I'm playing with the styles, I can see how wide it is it showing up in the right spot, you know. Our index.js file is literally just attaching our app to that specific div with the ID of root. That's all this is doing. Everything else lives at the top of app. So here's the app component. You can see we're importing a lot of stuff. And we have a router. We have a header, which is basically our navigation bar. And we have a bunch of routes to different pages. Also, there's this component called store. So this is what's going to handle our global state of the entire application. Not the state for everything, just for things that, like especially like router and header would need to know, and any others that just need access. Like if something happens on one page, I need that data on another one. So rather than trying to nest it in a weird way, we just put it into global state, and then we can access it no matter what page we're on. Our header is literally just a big nav bar. No fanciness here. I am going to introduce you to another way to do component state. I know you were introduced to the class components with this .set state. I'm going to show you another way. Whichever way is more comfortable with for you, by all means, go with it. I'll get into a little bit of that in a second. I could go on and on about all this stuff. And I'm also going to need your guys' help because I get really into this and I could just start talking really fast and start going through things. So if you're like, whoa, Joey, slow down, please explain this. Just interrupt me. I also want to make sure that I'm covering everything. So the home JS file is just a component to show our quote unquote homepage. As you can see here, we have some line of text that just says taste adventure 1 bite at a time. So that's this page here. That's literally all this is. This is a landing page. We have our inventory page. There's a bunch of stuff going, well, not too much stuff going on in here. But we have a reference to another component called table. That's, you can probably imagine what that's going to be. So that'll be our table of inventory. We also have a product page. So by clicking on one of these, we go to that particular product page. And depending on which item we've clicked on, as you can see, we've got we're working with props to pass in some stuff to figure out which product we should display on the page. We'll get into that with routing. We've got our basic shipments page. Also has links to the same product page, so you can link to the same page from wherever you are. This will highlight that global state type of thing. And let's see, and then the list itself is actually a separate component. So this list, I'm going to basically show you, I could have wrote a table for this as well, but I'd want to show you one way of doing it versus another. What are some benefits to that? What are some trade-offs? Whichever, it shows that you can build essentially the same thing in many ways. There's no one way to build any of this stuff. So whatever your creativity allows, that's your limit, your creativity. And of course, your knowledge of the framework, which is what we're into. And then this is the table component. All right, so we've got some other things in here that I'll highlight. There's the store. This is our global store. Has anyone here been introduced to the concept of a reducer yet? I know some people mentioned Redux or wanting to use Redux.
Is it with React too?
In general, it's mostly, it was introduced heavily with React. but it's not like the only thing. Okay, so just a disclaimer, we're not going to be using Redux for this. We're going to keep it on the simple side. Redux can be very complex and very hard to understand, especially in the span of 8 days for only, maybe 2.5 hours a day. There's a lot that you can do with it, but to be quite honest, most applications don't even need it anymore. So React ships with a couple tools now natively in the library that allow you to do basically the exact same thing as Redux, but without having to import another library and more libraries on top of that just to introduce more functionality. So I'm going to go over that with you when we get to state management, which I have it lower on the later in the course, but I'm going to be touching on it here and there as we go along. And depending on the speed that we go through and everyone's understanding, we might get to it a little sooner as well. All right, so that's our store. I also have this utilities file. That's just for our sorts for our table. This basic structure is kind of how we structure everything at work. Feel free to whatever structure makes sense for you. But logically, when I look at the name of this folder, I know exactly what to expect. I know my components are here. Actions, which are related to the store, live here. Any constants I have in my application, they live here. It helps kind of just organizing things, not just like, the program doesn't care, right? It doesn't matter where it is on your drive as long as it can access it. But we don't really write code for computers. We write it for humans, right? Because everything under the hood gets compiled down to bytecode anyway. Constants, a constant is, let me show you. So I have a constant I'm going to use in several places around the application. And in most cases, constants are strings. Rather than typing out a string here and a string over here and a string over here, possibly misspelling it or getting it wrong and figure, why isn't my application working? Well, it's because your string is misspelled, right? So we have one central location for variables that should be constant. They should never change, and they exist throughout the entire application. So anytime we need this, we just import it. That way, if we ever want to change what it is, like say load inventory, if I wanted to change it to load inventory now, it doesn't matter how many times I've imported it. This value will remain the same in every single place I've imported it. So you can have it in multiple places, but you only need to change it in one place. Saves a lot of time and effort and headache. And when you realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe I mistyped that. I do that all the time with the word update. I always type out udpate, like the D and the P, because they have my hands just, I don't know. Yeah. So constants are my friend, so I don't have to worry about stuff like that. But I still have to worry about stuff like that. I misspell things all the time. We went over the store real quick. Components.
I started coding, and then I realized that I was like, oh, I have to like map this out, otherwise I'm gonna get lost. So like I mapped mine out. Like how much are you mapping out, and what are you figuring out? Like Alice, we did our wireframes, so like the wireframe down every little thing. And I felt like that was like make everything. How do you?
That's how I personally do it. Is I'll just literally go to the whiteboard at my desk and take a dry erase marker and just draw something really fast, right? So personally, I'm at the point where I can visualize it, most of it in my head, but I still need, like especially on a new project, we're also kind of lucky where we work because we have a UX designer, so he'll mock up what it should look mostly like. And so we have that as a wireframe. So we can clearly see, oh, well, we'll need a table here. We'll need a button here. Or we'll need a nav bar and stuff like that. But for like personal projects, I'll just whiteboard it out real quick, even a pencil on paper, just to kind of write down notes and thoughts and stuff like that. If my application has a lot of data, I'll create flowcharts of how that data is supposed to flow through the application. So if user clicks this, this database should be updated. When that database updates or whatever, this stored procedure needs to run. What are all the things that need to happen? And a flowchart helps me a lot on that. And if you walk into our office, there's probably 5 or 6 whiteboards at any given time that are completely full of just flowcharts, arrows and boxes and all kinds of notes and stuff like that. So we really embrace that sort of thing, and I found a lot of benefit to it. Just kind of like real quick, it doesn't have to be detailed. You don't have to go to Microsoft Visio and create a whole thing, even though I will, but which I have for you guys too, just to share some visuals. But just to draw it out real quick, it just takes a few minutes to get your thoughts down. There's something about putting a pencil on paper that kind of like helps something manifest into reality. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's very true, right? Because then you look at it and you're like, oh, I have to do that now. Yep. Unless you crumple up and throw it away. Actions, I'll just show you real fast. We're going to get into this when we talk about the store. So an action is something that we create to affect a change in the store. So a user clicks on something, they will what's called dispatch an action. That action carries data with it to change something in the store so the rest of the application can get access to that data, or whatever it happens to be. Turn something on, turn something off, load some stuff into our application, all of those things. Right. So that's the basic overview of this. Any questions on what we'll be talking about so far, or anything that sparked an interest in this, or any questions so far? Good. Okay. So let's get cracking. Just get my reference up here. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by making sure there's no questions in here. I'll leave this open. I'm going to start from scratch. So everyone can follow along exactly. All of our applications should look almost identical. Okay. If you want to change some names or some stuff like that, that's fine. Also, if you don't want to figure out how to type all the styles out right away, and you just want to see something on the screen, and then we can talk about it, I can post a link to those. Actually, we'll get to that as we move along. So I'm going to just start figuring out where I'm at in my system here. So I have a directory called CIC. Sorry, I can't make this any bigger. Or can I? Oh, I can. Sort of. Let's see. Oh. Okay, I guess it's not the. Can everyone read that? Hopefully. I'll try to make it as big as I can. Probably at like 300% right now. Okay. So I am here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new direct. Is everyone at a terminal? Okay. So we're going to make a new directory. We'll call it byte. And then we'll cd into that directory. So that's where we're at. And the first thing we're going to do, we're going to make another directory, and we're just going to call it, we'll just call it data. That's where we're going to store our data for our application. And you don't have to type out all the data. I have that for you as well. And the next thing we'll do is we'll say create React app. And we can call this anything. We'll just call it client. I like client. So that's where our UI will live. I believe in Max's video tutorial, he called it front end. Same thing. It's just call it what you want. You can call it elephant or Swiss cheese, depending on your application. So we'll wait for that to do what it does. In the meantime, I'm going to post a link to where we're going to grab our data from. Back up state. So it's in the Careers and Code Sandbox GitHub repository under my name, under Byte. And there's two files in here. There's bytedata.json and bytestyles.css. So here's all the data that we're going to use for our app. And you don't have to import this or anything like that. You can literally just copy and paste this stuff, and we'll do just that. It's just a JSON file with the really simple object structure to it. Oh, do you want me to just link it right in the Slack? Oh, I'm already there. All right. So at this point, does everyone have their Create React app finished? Sorry? Oh, scroll up. Oh, I just put the link there just for now. We're gonna do that next. All right. So now we have two folders. We have client and data. And everyone has Visual Studio Code installed, right? So if I just type code space dot, that'll open Visual Studio Code at the correct level, right at our byte folder. Whoa. Does everyone know how to start it? Use the terminal in Visual Studio Code? Is that everyone's familiar with that? All right. So if we go to data, well, it's just for, okay, just want to make sure we do have some code in there. That's good. But in data, we'll start a new file. This is just byte data.json. And if we go to that link and click on byte data.json, just highlight all of this. We can paste it in. And then save it. See, working with data is easy. All right. Everyone good? Okay. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go into client, into source. Now there's a lot of stuff in here we won't use, like the logo.svg, we're not going to use that. But we want to make sure that at least we have something that can run. Oh, there is another thing I'm going to show you for code formatting. I know there were some that are having issues with code formatting. So this is going to help you a lot. It's a library called Prettier. Has anyone heard of that? Or does anyone have it installed? Prettier?
Yeah.
You? Okay. Yep.
I think I fixed it. I got to a point sometimes where I would go, I have it where it saves and then it was formatted manually. Sometimes when I did that, it would mess it up. The formatting would be off, where it would throw errors.
It shouldn't throw an error.
Has that ever happened to you?
Usually when it does that, it's something I did that wasn't like compilable. Like I missed a comma or something like that usually. So it's usually like your syntax, right? So it does the best it can to figure out where it should be. But if you didn't, let's say you were creating an array of things and you put spaces instead of commas, it would be like, no, because it doesn't know that it's not valid, right? So it's, for me personally, it's always been something like that, like, oh, missed a comma, or I didn't close a div tag or something like that. So just go ahead and double check your code. Look for any like any the red squiggles or anything like that. Make sure you've got everything the way you need it. And chances are there's probably something that was missed, because I haven't really had it like format something that was correctly written and have it like throw an error afterwards. But that's just my experience. So if it happens, we can come over and take a look and see.
Yeah, I was talking to Max today about that because I was Prettier and it wasn't working, but it was had it.
Okay. It doesn't work if it can't like validate it, basically. Yeah. All right. Oh, data is from, I put the link in here. So just go here and then just basically copy and paste it out of there. Yep. There's not a particular package that you need to work with JSON. Is that?
I mean, just like to have something
Oh, this wasn't generated. I actually typed all of it out. Also, a lot of the data that you get, your backend will be sending it as JSON according to like the models that you're using or the tables or whatever you're sending it from. It'll be structured that way. So when you read it, it'll look like this, but it's the backend that's sending it that way. No, this is just because we want to focus on just the front end React part. We don't want to wire up an entire backend because it's going to take the better part of what we could be doing on the other thing. So I'm going to be using something called Json Server to serve this to our front end. But we'll get there during the week. Right now, we just want to get this in here so we can get something basically on the screen. All right.
The files that you have in GitHub, the styles, CSS,
Mm-hmm.
that needs to go into the source file?
Yes. Yes.
And the other.
And the other one goes into the data folder. Yep. So right here under byte data.
Kelly, I deleted the app.css and index.css. We never used. And the logo.
We need, oh, the index.css? Yeah, we won't use it.
But now it's
Because it's trying to import it from somewhere.
so
So inside your index.js file.
yes, that's
It's probably referencing something. Oh, you're using the logo? Oh. But you have to import, yeah, just delete the yeah, typically it's because it's trying to find something that's no longer being imported. Yeah. At that point, it's like hunt and peck. Like which one is it? So what we'll do. Yeah, we'll start with doing that. We'll just clean everything up. So inside, let me close the terminal real quick. Can everyone still see this okay? If I shrink it just a tad bit, is that still okay? All right, so in our app, we're only going to want this. And we'll just put something in here. We'll just say hi, just so we can render something. We also don't need logo or app.css. So it should look something like this. App.css we don't need, so we can actually delete that. We don't need app.test. Index.css, don't really need it. Index.js we definitely need, but we don't need the reference to index.css. Logo we don't need. Service worker we can keep. And so let's see where we're at. So I'm currently in the byte, so I need to go into client, type npm start. Has anyone gotten their application on screen yet? The basic one? We're going to be, there's only one, the byte styles is the only other one we're going to be pulling down. The rest we're going to be creating as we go. Yep. So now it says hi at the top left corner. A really meek hi. Okay. All right. Has everyone gotten that far? Not yet? Okay. I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So who hasn't gotten there yet? Just so we can see something on the screen. Right now, as long as we're not importing. You want to close so C into actually not here inside there, right? It's just driving along. Everyone else?
I got it, but what is this error? I think it's all the
That's another thing that's trying to do. No, you don't know that. There's a lot of functionality built into Create React App that most of it you'll never have to touch. Oh, this source. Go to AppJS. Basically, that entire header. Just see something on the screen. As long as you see it on the screen. And then these two imports, import how we have CSS. And then go into index.js. If there's one more. Like, it's all in the same page. So just make sure you run it to see, CD into client from your terminal and then npm start. Okay, cool. So everyone else is it there? All right. All I have is a div that says hi. That's it. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, you can close down that window, is we're going to get one more thing set up, and then we'll take a break after that. Oh, the browser that I opened, you could just close that out. And then inside your terminal, just to Control-C to shut down the server. All right. All right, cool. All right, so we're going to install something called Json Server, which will act as our backend. And Json Server is really, really nice because it lets you create your endpoints before you create your endpoints. And what I mean by that is you'll have a JSON file, and at the top level, those top level properties, like if I go to bytedata.json, you can see I have a products, inventory, shipments. That top level acts as your routes, your backend routes. So if you need to grab stuff from products, you'd say, okay, fetch from API/products, and it'll just grab the data out of here and give it to you. You can also write to it, you can update it, and it'll actually update the JSON file on your drive while it's running. So you can do get requests, you can do post requests, you can do put requests. Anything that you can do to a regular backend server, you can issue to this. Now, there's some caveats to that. It's not a full-fledged backend. You are working with just a JSON file. But what's nice about that is you can stub out what you need to have happen in the front end and get back data that you ideally want to have to make sure that your front end is working right. Like if I want to create a table to display my inventory, I want to know that my inventory is coming in this exact shape. Every record has an ID. It has, let's go into it. An ID, a product, and a quantity. I want to make sure that those objects come back with those properties, and this allows me to create for that. So when I'm ready to create my backend route, if I'm not getting those, I know the problem's on the backend route. I don't have to hunt around and figure out what's wrong. Because if it's working this way, and I've already created the component, and I'm getting this data, this is the ideal situation. It should be working. So you know exactly where to go to look for where the issue may be. So to install Json Server, we can go in any terminal and just type npm install -g JSON Server. I already have it installed, so it's not gonna. Oh yes, stop your server. Yep. Oh, sorry. We can be in any folder at this point because we're installing it globally. This will allow you to use it on any project. You don't have to save it. By doing -g, it's actually saving it to your system. So you can use it in any project. JSON-server. Yep, let's see if I can blow it up a little bit. So you'll need to sudo in front, sudo space npm install -g. Sam, sudo make me a sandwich. Just kidding. Did you ever? I've seen a lot of comics like that, where like, do this for me. No, sudo do it for me.
Why is it that sometimes it works like we just did, and other times you have to do it?
Depends on the permissions of the folder you're in. So for me, in most cases, I just type it instinctively, except for that time, apparently. Right, so like your internal user folder is protected. People, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. There's reasons why you don't, and there's reasons like this where it's fine because it's your own personal machine.
You're like pulling in a package that you don't know what's running, you could be installing like any random thing. So you should really only do
things that have been vetted out. Yeah. I've been using Json Server for several years now, and it's not installed anything maliciously on me. Yeah. Look at the download history. If it's like 3, you probably don't want to do it. Yeah. Oh, package.json is the actual configuration, right? And then package-lock.json is a list of everything that's been installed based on that configuration. So say, for example, you put your project up in a repository on GitHub. you want to make sure that anyone that works on it, that brings it down, gets the exact same versions of those packages as you have. So that package lock.json ensures that when they type npm install, those exact versions will be installed. And so they're not going to get something that you're not using, so it's you can test it properly. Yeah, so that this package.json file will tell you everything, all the configuration for your app. Yep. All the dependencies. Yep. Like in this one, we have React, React DOM, and React scripts. So these are this application depends on those three things being installed when you type npm install. Package-lock.json is a list of all the packages that have been installed and the exact version that you're at. Yep. Yep. Okay. So did that work for everyone? Did it get it installed? Okay. So now we're gonna watch some magic. Magic. So if we go, I'm sorry. Oh. So actually, if we go into package.json, which is where we want to go right now, under the scripts property, we want to add a new one. And we'll just type Json Server, -server. And I need to remember my syntax. Yes. And then we'll type Json-server space --port space, say 3001. Our React server is going to be running on 3000, so we'll just do 3001. Another space, and then we want to tell it --watch. So we're going to watch our data. If we make any changes, we want to see those propagate into the application. So we're going to watch that file, and then we have to give it a path to the file name. So in this case, we go up one into data. So /data/byte data.json, and save that. So now in your terminal, if you say npm space run space Json server, it should spit out something like this where it says hi, really friendly like, and it gives you a bunch of resources. npm space run space Json-server. Oh, do you need the run line too? Oh, it started right here. Right there. Yes. Json server. So the script that we typed. Oh, okay. It says, oops. Let's take a look.
Oh my God, I typed JASON. That's
I've done that before. That's a very common mistake.
Is it?
Yes.
I'm like, what's going on?
This. Your stuff. Okay. So we'll try to yeah, so you can you go back into the terminal, just do VLC, then just delete this and rename that without just. like it noticed that that wasn't technically there. So it created one for you. Does everyone see something like this running? All right. Not yet? I'll make sure everyone's there. Oh, this is something else. Oh, okay. Oh, you can see the count. There have been countless times, like, I'll give you a quick story about commas. So I was working on debugging some code that I was in the current process of writing. Everything was working, and then something changed. I'm like, okay, now something's wrong. It took me 1 hour to figure out I missed a comma. So do not feel bad. I once took 3 hours to figure out I misspelled something. So it's like you start to question life and like, oh, it's just a typo. Oh, so now you would type npm run.
Like that, came back with the error. Oh.
Oh, oh, okay. So is that what you actually typed out? Scroll all the way down. I think that's why. I know, it's because it's like you say it like. Oh, so now the data. Oh, there's no data. Oh. Okay, you should be good. So save that. Actually, you'll need to go down here and hit Control-C. Stop the server because it's trying to like, yeah. Or no, it didn't. Okay. So just use up. Whoever you type last. Were you able to successfully install? Oh. Sure. All right. So we're going to head over to our browser, open a new tab, http://localhost 3001. Usually gives me a nice pretty message. Okay, it's not going to give me the nice pretty message. All right, so by going here, we're effectively accessing our JSON server. And remember what I was saying about the routes? So if we look at bytedata.json, we essentially have 3 routes. So we have products, inventory, and shipments. So if I want to look at my inventory, I would say localhost 3001 inventory. And that'll give me back the JSON that's in there. So if I wanted to grab my products, I do products and shipments. So now I have access. So it's
Oh, okay, I can't see.
oh yeah, it won't
No, it's
increase the size of that.
It does.
No. Yeah, it won't increase the URL size, unfortunately.
So just. You just wrote in the parameter.
I wrote in, yep, localhost 3001 or colon 3001 / and then whatever route I wanted to hit, right? And our route is just that top level property name of our overall JSON object, which is really, really cool. So we can also, this is a GET request. We can also post to this and create things as well. And we'll get to that later in the week, or more likely next week when we get to working with data asynchronously. Right, because at one point our inventory manager will have shipments coming in, and we need to be able to receive those shipments. Otherwise, it's not very good inventory manager. So that, at one point we'll get to that. But now we have data. I can close that out, head back over to here. And inside our app, I'll get to that in a minute. So has everyone seen that on their screen? No. Not yet? Okay. So most everyone has. So at this point, we'll take a break. And after the break, we're going to start figuring out what needs to be created in our folder structure, where our components will need to live, and just a general stubbing out of things that we'll need going forward. Okay? So what do I just mute it? Okay. So I know with a lot of the like the tools that have been presented over this course, I know there's like a lot, I'm sure, or it like seems like there's a lot. And I wanted to introduce only tools that I felt were going to be really productive for you. So like Json Server, I feel is a really good one. It's something that I've been using for a couple of years now, like I've said, and it just makes development really easy, especially in a place where I work, where there's teams dedicated to different aspects of an application. So I work on a team where there's a lot of front-end application and what I would call the quote-unquote middle end. That's something like with the .NET framework, we have routes, we have controllers that determine which view is going to be served up to the user. That is what something I would call like middle end, which sounds ridiculous, but then your front end, of course, is the UI code. Most of my day is surrounded with React and questions about React and how we're going to structure different things. And then there's the back end stuff. So I only work on the back end occasionally because most of my time is spent on a lot of the front end stuff. And then we also have like a whole data team. So in fact, we have two data teams. We have one that handles creating like stored procedures that are going to run every night, or creating packages that our front end needs to call to grab data from the database. And then there's another data team that handles a lot of what we consider to be big data at where we work, even though it's not as big as a lot of other places. But a lot of the technology that revolves around that team is specialized in handling that. And then we have another team that specializes in the packages that we use. And then I'm on the team that specializes in the most of the front end stuff. So a tool like Json Server is really beneficial because I don't necessarily have a backend endpoint to call yet to grab the data I need, but I know what it needs to look like. I know the shape. I know which components I need to create for that data. And I can do that. I can mock all the data up just like I'm showing you here. And I can work on the front end. And then when the data team is finished with their endpoint, all I have to do is, instead of pointing to my Json server, I switch it to the backend, the live backend, and I have my data. And as long as they did their job and I've done mine, everything merges up quite nicely, which is not all the time, but most of the time. So tools like this are really, really helpful in development. I know everyone here is creating kind of all aspects of their project by themselves, but when you're working for a place that has different teams, tools like this are invaluable because you can still get your work done without waiting for someone else to get theirs done, especially if you want to focus on the front end. All right, so with that said, we're going to go into figuring out which components we're going to need for this application. And I'm just going to look real quick at the folder structure we have here, and we have about half an hour left. So that's enough time to just kind of stub out some of these things just to get something up on the screen. So we'll start with our app and we'll figure out what's supposed to be in our application or in our main app component. And you can see here, it's just a function. Actually, this would be a great time to talk about function components versus class components. With the exception of one component that I'm importing, there are no class components in this application. And I chose that for a very specific reason. With function components, depending on what most people describe them as, the official term right now, according to React, is a function component. It used to be called a stateless function component because only class components had state and lifecycle methods and so forth. That is not the case anymore. You can actually have internal state in function components now, and that is the direction that React is going. So it's actually a really good time to learn it that way now. Not that class components are going away. They're going to be around for the foreseeable future, but there's a lot of gotchas when working with class components underneath the hood. A lot of things that the React team is not able to do because some of that stuff is prohibiting the things they want to do. So that's the direction. They've always really wanted to go in the direction of only functions. They did classes kind of like I don't want to speak for them, but the impression I got is they were doing it because everyone else has classes. There's native quote unquote JavaScript classes, so let's implement that. Even though from the very start, they had a function called create class, which would represent a class. Now, JavaScript classes are not true classes, like they would be in the object, like say like a C or C# or something like that, something where it's there's inheritance. But excuse me. But at the same time, they wanted to keep true to their vision, so they came up with a way that you can manage state and lifecycle type methods inside of function components. Since that's the direction they're heading, I figured that'd be a great opportunity to teach it that way. Since you're going to see a lot of it going forward, you're still going to see a lot of class components out there. In fact, the store component they're going to be using underneath the hood, it is a class component, but it is being rewritten as a function component. And I'll get to the store stuff a little later. But I wanted to explain a couple of differences between functions and classes. So if, is anyone here confused between function and class components, or does everyone have a basic understanding of the differences? Just a refresher? Okay. So like I was saying before, function components were typically called stateless functional components, or a lot of people refer to them as presentation components, which means all they do is they present the stuff that you give it. They don't internally manage anything. They're just there to display stuff on the screen, whether it's a button or a div or an image or anything like that. So that was their main function, was to just display stuff. And then class components had the ability to manage state. So they could manage the data that's going on inside that component. So for toggling something on and off the screen, or switches, or it could be anything, right? And also class components were typically used for initially fetching data from like a backend. So there's a lifecycle method called component did mount. That means the component has mounted to the DOM. And when that happens, this optional function on that class will fire. And you have access to that point in time. So you could say, okay, it's mounted in the DOM. I know I've got my divs and image tags in the right place. Now go fetch the data so I can populate those. That's the concept. So these classes had extra abilities that you had available to you. So now functions have basically the same abilities accessible to them as well. The syntax is a little different. So I'm going to just create real quick. I'm going to go to, I'm going to start just a new quick little thing. Testing. So just take a second. This is my testing thing where I test all my stuff out. So I'll get rid of that. And then I have, this is just a function component. So I'll create two versions of the same thing. So we have, let's see, do function view. And we'll just return something really simple, like, hi, I'm a view. That's it. And if I spell it right. Pretty simple, just present something. I could do the same thing with a class. I could say class, we'll just call it view class. And then there's different syntax, right? So are you familiar with the syntax? Okay, so extends react.component. And now the class is represented as this object syntax, where it needs to have a render method, renders a property of that class. And then we return, we'll just do I'm a class component. Right, so essentially they're doing the same thing at this point. And then with your class components, you have the ability to have state. We can manage internal state to that component. We'll just say message hi, and then inside our component or inside our return, we could say this.state.message. Right, so I think this is, everyone understands this at this point, I hope, right? We're all there? Okay, so if I were to do that in a function, how could I do that? Normally, without any internal state mechanisms, how would I get a message into a function component? I would pass it in via props. So I'd say I'd pass in props, and then I could say, hey, I'm just going to render out props, and we'll just say we're expecting props.message. Then in my view, I give it a message. It renders my message. Pretty simple. Everyone's got a good understanding of the way props is an object with properties that we access. So the differences between what we're seeing now are actually kind of drastic, right? So this component is managing everything internally, and this one's expecting that stuff to come in because it can't, right? It can't do anything any other way. Well, obviously until now. So the way I would manage state in a function is I would, instead of importing just React or React and component, I would import this thing called use state. And I'm going to get into this a little bit more heavily as we go along. But I just want to demonstrate real quick how I can have access to quote unquote state inside a function component. So the syntax is going to look a little weird at first. I'm just going to type it out just to get it out there. So right now there's nothing, but as soon as I put something in there, now I'm managing state inside a function component. So the way this works, and I will get into this a little bit more in depth, but I just want to kind of prepare you for the way we're going to build this application, is I'm creating two constants. One is message, and one is called set message. Message contains the data that I want to store, and set message is a function that's going to update that data. Use state takes by default, or takes as a parameter, two different things, but we're going to focus on the simpler one. It takes in the piece of data you want to store as its default. So as you can see right here, if I were to get rid of that and just do an empty string, it displays nothing because, well, it is displaying something. It's displaying an empty string. But as soon as I type another default in there, it's going to show up. So what use state does, when you call it, it passes you back an array. The first element of that array is your data. And the second element is a function that updates that data. So what you're looking at here, if you remember destructuring, that's what this syntax is. So you're destructuring out of an array message and set message. Now to make this more explicit, because explicit, I'm going to say, we're going to say just const state. Now, if I were to go down here and say state at index 0, I'm getting back my data. Did everyone follow that so far? So state right now, in fact, to make it even more explicit, is this is a state array. Right? My first element is my data. And if I were to render out the second one, it's not going to show you anything because it's a function. It's not going to render a function to the screen. But I could call that function, and I could update the state just the same way you would say this.set state. This function is going to update your state. I'll just show you real quick. We'll go back to the destructured syntax because that's the way you're going to see it out in the wild. So we've got our message and our set message. I'm going to wrap everything in a div because we need a top level element. I'm just going to put a button in here. And you don't have to follow along right now. We're going to get more into depth. Just want to make sure the concept is out there. So we're going to say update message as the button. And when I click it, I want to update that message. So this will take a function, and I'm going to call set message. And we're going to pass it the data I want message to become. When I click this button, it's going to call set message, and it's going to update the state. This is the same way as going down here. In fact, this will be a good illustration of some of the visual differences. A lot of typing. So this, I would say this dot set state, pass it an object, message, new message. Nope, because that's spelled wrong. New message. So let's take a look at the differences in syntax. So here at this class, we have 5, 10, we've got 13 lines of code. We've got 9 lines of code. So we've spent a little bit less in code land, but then we've got the same functionality out of it. So you're going to, the other thing is with classes, create React app is implementing like extra libraries to help you write code a lot cleaner, a lot shorter. So in reality, state equals this is not typically what you would do without that extra package. Typically, you would write constructor that would take in props, and then we call super props. And then if we wanted state, we'd say this dot state. You can see where this is kind of getting out of hand, right? So there's a lot of extra stuff these packages do for you, and being able to write your code a lot cleaner and more understandably. Also, there's some extras that Create React App throws in when creating event handlers. So if I wanted to create an event handler down here, I could just say update message, right? And then say this dot set state. This syntax is actually there. It's going to allow me to do that because of that extra package. But it's not really what's going on. So, well, this is just kind of like a syntax helper. In reality, we would say update message as a function. And then in order for our component to use it, we have to bind to it. I don't know if any of this was covered, but there's a lot of this stuff that these extra packages that are doing for you, right? So a class component can get pretty big pretty quick, and all we're doing is trying to update a message. Now, that doesn't mean class components aren't useful. You can definitely use them, and that's fine. Let's get rid of that for a second and go back to just this. But if I can accomplish the same thing with just this, I'm saving myself a lot of typing. And once you understand the syntax, it's a breeze to get stuff up and going really quick. Yeah.
I don't know if you went over object structure. That new only me.
In the ES6 stuff. So the destructuring will need a little bit extra on.
No one else feels that way.
Okay. I mean, we have 15 minutes.
Did you also go over binding?
Binding? Yep. I shouldn't have deleted that code. Hold on. Well, we can go over binding without the code, actually. So there's a function that's available to a method available to all functions called bind. And what that does is it assigns the this keyword to whatever value you want it to be. So in the case of a class component, when we say this.setState, this represents the instance of that component that's living out there in the DOM, right? It's not the component definition, it's the instance of that thing that's been created. So you can have, let's say, a table component. You've got 5 of them on the screen. By saying this.setState, this refers to that specific table over here, or this specific table over here. It's not like all the tables. So the this keyword is very important. When you have a method on a class, like say update message, let me put the code back. It's just going to be a little simpler to demonstrate. So inside this constructor, this also represents that instance of the class component. So if I have an update message, let me actually do that. Say this dot update message. That's not going to work because this dot update message refers to this instance of the class, but this is just sitting out there in a class. In React, this is the gotchas behind class components. It doesn't know that this refers to this yet. So what you would need to do is you would need to say this dot update message equals this dot update message dot bind to this. Really confusing, but it works. Yes, the ownership is transferred to the instance of that particular class that's living out there. Without that syntax, it won't know which update message to call. So those little helpers like the thing that's installed in Create React App, I can get rid of this like this. I can change it to an arrow function. And that will work. Because an arrow function remembers what this is, where it's declared, right? So the instance of this, it's created, and it says, okay, all instances of this are related to, this word is like so hard to talk about. All instances of this are related to this instance of this component, including update message, because it's a method on this particular object. So when I say this dot update message, it should fire it. That arrow function remembers what the context of this is and applies it appropriately. Now, this is syntactic sugar around all that other stuff. And that's what those extra packages that Create React App gives you access to by default, because it's built into that helper. Yep.
So what is an instance doing for me versus not having an instance?
So if you had 20 buttons on the screen and you click one of them, you only want that one to fire, not every single one of them. So that's what the instance gives you. So click this button, this dot update message. Well, I only want the button I clicked to update the message with the value it wants, not all the other buttons that are on the screen. You could, but then if all you're doing is creating different buttons, then you're doing a lot of extra work for yourself when you can just create one button component and pass it different properties to do different things. So it's code reuse, right? This is what's referred to as the composability of React. You create one component to use everywhere within your application, but you only need to write it once. It may take different props and do different things based on the functions you pass it, but you only have to write it once.
So you get the instance of the button and you're in a particular situation, you want it to do something, but just for that instance of the button.
Yes. So good example, save and cancel. You don't have to write a save and a cancel button. You could just write a button where you pass in the value to display, save or cancel, and then pass in the function to determine what's going to happen when you click it. Save your data or cancel it out. but you saved yourself the trouble of having to write another button and just change one or two little things in each one. Right? Another nice thing about this whole composing aspect with this component reuse is that, let's say that you have 20 different tables on the screen and they're all displaying different data, and you want to change the sorting order for every single one. Now you have to go to 20 different components and rewrite the same code. Or you could just go to one component, change it there, and all of them get the same logic just by default, because you're referencing that one component over and over. So it saves you time, effort, frustration, and it just makes everything cleaner. It's easier to find, it's easier to read. It may seem confusing at first, but once you start working with a same component over and over, you'll be like, oh, I'm so glad all I have to do is just call a new one. I don't have to rewrite the whole thing over and over. Okay. Does that make sense? Cool. All right, so destructuring, right? All right. So there's two types of destructuring. There's object destructuring and array destructuring. So what you're seeing here is array destructuring, where you say const or let, depending on what variable instantiation you want to do. And by wrapping, let's just do this. Let's do the same thing twice. So we'll say const message equals use state explicit. Now it's going to throw a bunch of red curlies because it's not going to like this, but state 0. Okay, not 2. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating a variable called message, and it's equal to the result of calling use state, and I'm grabbing the first element in that array, the element at index 0. The next one I'm saying const set message equals use state explicit, get me the second element in that array, right? So that syntax gets pretty old pretty quick, especially if you have an array of, like, say 5 things, right? The destructuring portion, or the destructuring syntax, says I'm going to create 2 constants. The fact that I'm putting them in brackets means I'm going to be pulling them out of an array. The one I name first is going to be the first element. The one I name second is going to be the second element. If there were a third, it'd be the third element in that array. And it's going to create a variable for each one of these, except all I did was I called this thing. I know this thing's giving me back an array. I know it has elements in it. So by using this syntax, I'm saying, okay, I know there's going to be an array. I know there's going to be, well, in reality, there's going to be 2 elements. So give me the first and second. Call the first one message. Call the second one set message. Did that make sense? There's probably a few ways I can say it, just in case that one didn't.
So you either use line 73 and 74, or you just use 75?
Or I just use 75. Now, in the case of 73 and 74 in React land, that won't work. Simply because this is not going to be related to this, because they're 2 separate calls. So, and that's just kind of the nature of use state. So we kind of have to do it this way. Or, like I was explaining before, I could say, let me just comment those out so it doesn't yell at me. I could say const state array equals use state, and then I grab the first index and the second index off of it for my other variables. And that was const state array equals use state. Doesn't matter. So now this is an array. with 2 elements, and then I could go along and I could say, okay, const message equals state array first element, right? What just happened? Didn't like that one. There we go. That's what I wanted to do. Then I can come along and I could say, okay, const set message equals state array at index. This is getting old, right? Like having to retype all that stuff out. That's what you had to do, right? That was not available until ES6. So now that we have this, it makes a lot of sense once you understand the syntax, right? So I'm going to create 2 variables. The brackets dictate that it's going to be from an array. And then the order that I write these down is the order of the elements that get put into them. Everyone cool on that? So if I were to say, let's just pretend that use state, instead of giving us an array, gives us an object with 2 properties. It doesn't, but that's okay. I'm going to leave this part off just for a second. Use state. Doesn't matter what it is. So if I was an array, I would use the square brackets. If I'm destructuring object, I use the curly braces. So visually, you can see that which one's going to be an array and which one's coming from an object, right? Because of those specific symbols, that's how you would create an object anyway. So when you wrap, you put those in there, what this is really saying is saying const message equals use state dot message. Const message or set message equals use state dot set message. Oops. This property exists on the object, and this property exists on the object. So rather than write all this stuff out, I could just say, I have an object. I know these 2 properties exist on it. So create variables of the same name as that property. And now I have access to those variables throughout my application or function or wherever I'm at. Did that help? I have another way. This one, this is the way that once I saw it, I was like, oh, I totally get it now. So hopefully it helps.
What has helped me in the past is to see, like, I have this code here, and I have this here, and this is the shorter version of it, and this is the longer version of it, so to see how we would.
It's about what I'm gonna do.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I'll just use const. So we'll say object, or yeah, we'll say my object. An object, it has a name and an age. No one knows. All right. So if I wanted to grab those properties off and save them into variables, I could say const name equals my object.name. And that would be equal to Joey, because I clearly see that my object has a property called name, and I'm assigning that value into the variable I'm creating. Then I could say const age equals my object.age. Or I could save myself typing, and I could say const, I know it's an object, so I want name and I want age out of my object. So these are doing the exact same thing, except this is shorter.
Now, can you comment that and copy and paste that example
Yep.
into Slack?
All right. Yep. Did that make sense for everyone that it didn't make sense before? Okay. When I saw it like that, I was like, oh, I got it. I totally got this. And I haven't looked back since, except now to explain it better. Okay, so Slack, and then, no, how do we do that? Oh, I forgot how to, is that what it is? Okay. All right, let's get back to, now arrays are the same way, except you use the square brackets and it refers to the elements instead of the properties. So when we look at this code here, get rid of all of that stuff. We're saying, hey, create two variables, call one message, call one set message, and grab those out of the array that useState gives me when I call it. And then I have access to it down here. All right. Oh, that's fun. Oh, it's because I'm logged in over here. Okay. Okay, so any questions on everything we've gone over today so far? Did that last portion help out a lot? The distinction between function components and class components, does everyone have a basic understanding? Okay.
And then one is an array and the other one is
Object destructuring and array destructuring. Yep. Is anyone excited by the fact that we can write less code and accomplish the same thing? Okay, cool. Now there's a few things that function components don't have access to yet. And those are the things that typically you will probably never need anyway. There's some things that like library maintainers and stuff would need access to that they can't switch out yet. But 99.9% of the time, you will never have to write a class component again. At least in this class. Pun intended. All right. Any other questions before we close out for today? We're good? Okay, so tomorrow, I don't really have any homework for tonight, simply because of the way this is, we're going to be building this thing. Yeah, that's true. Simply because we're building this together. So I'm hoping that this whole experience building together will more than make up for having to do homework. Where appropriate, I may assign some, so just be on the lookout. But it's not going to be like, oh, create all these components and do all this other stuff. It may just be like, hey, research something that you really want that may relate to something we're doing here that could relate to your capstone. And let's cover that a little bit more. Maybe that could be your homework. If you see aspects of what you've seen so far, like, oh, I'd like to use that, jot those down and let's talk about them tomorrow. All right, so we'll get into more of the actual structure of the application, stubbing out some of the components, and then that will be tomorrow. And then we'll get into more of this whole function components accessing state. Cool. All right, have a good night, everyone.
I need to get a scratch. I always write everything in my console.